Hey there, I'm Pete Townsend, and this is Money Never Sleeps. We look inside the minds of entrepreneurs and at the crossover of startups, enterprise, finance, technology, and life as we know it. Before we dive into this week's episode of Money Never Sleeps, just a quick heads up that the ETH Dublin Hackathon 2023 is just ahead of us in Dublin on May 26th to May 28th at Dogpatch Labs in Dublin. ETH Dublin is the first Web3-focused hackathon conducted in Ireland, and the idea is to create a space for the community to build and attract talent to the Web3 ecosystem. Check out the details on ethdublin.io. On the show this week, we've got Deb Pratiher, co-founder and CEO of Quest Labs, one of the 12 founding teams forming the Techstars Web3 Accelerator class of 2023. Quest Labs is building infrastructure enabling organizations to leverage data in a privacy-preserving manner to unlock powerful user experiences. Deb is a product leader and engineer with experience building and scaling with data infrastructure and systems at big tech companies. She is passionate about AI and Web3, and particularly in the intersection of both. Prior to starting Quest, she worked and researched at Nvidia, Visa, Tesla, and Carnegie Mellon University, as she was chosen for the extremely selective Kleiner Perkins Fellowship Program there. In this episode, Deb and I speed run through her life experiences that brought her to the point of co-founding Quest Labs, before we dig into why the world needs what Quest are bringing to market right now. We also talk about the interplay of owning your own data on this big, wonderful creation called the internet, and how that drives a network effect that will deliver the future that Quest are running toward. All right here on Money Never Sleeps. Hey Deb, how's it going?
Good. How's it going, Pete?
Awesome. Great to have you here. We're live in London at WeWork Aldwych at Techstars London recording this.
Definitely a different experience being live recording versus virtually, where you could be speaking with a robot in this AI-built world. So
you definitely could. I know
you're real.
Yeah, I'm real. Look, I pinch myself. I'm real.
Yep.
Okay, cool. Listen, you getting to London was a little bit of an easier experience than how you tried to get to Dublin last month. How did that all go for you?
Honestly, I was excited because I got my citizenship at a time when I was traveling more after the COVID world, but it just came one day too late. And prior to that, had a lot of really cumbersome, painful phone calls with the government. As you guys would know, that it's always tedious to work with the government. But this time around, I booked my flight. So very excited to be in person with the rest of the Techstars cohort. But to anyone dealing with the government for visa issues, I would say good luck. And hopefully you don't have to go through that painful journey.
Oh yeah, but you flew to Miami to try.
Oh yeah.
Didn't you? You flew to Miami.
So I did, exactly.
From New York.
To some people it would sound crazy, but this kind of goes to say that, as a founder, you have grit and hustle. And I was thinking of all the creative ways to make it happen. So basically, to get my visa on time, I decided the only appointment they had available in the country was in Miami. So it's kind of like how you land customers, right? Yeah. I was like, let me show up and they'll give me the passport. So I flew from New York to Miami to get the one appointment that they had, stood there in the passport office the entire day, and only to hear that, okay, great, you've showed up, here's your appointment, here's your passport, you won't get it the same day. But again, I did what it takes, and that's a story that I'll always remember.
Yeah, and then you flew back to New York, kind of like, oh, Jesus.
Right, but it was Miami, so made the most of it. Not complaining, it wasn't, some random city.
No, that's good. That's a good place to be marooned, isn't it?
Exactly. Right. But what counts is I got the passport and learned my lesson, and here I am in London.
And now you're in London. Perfect. You're in London with us. It's great. It's great. But listen, Deb, you've got this background that when I went through this a few months ago, and then now going back through it just in the last couple of days, knowing that this chat was coming up, it makes sense to me. But let's see if we can make it make sense to the world, right? In that you've got this incredible experience between 2018 to 2022. And it's just this deep and rich set of experience, but it feels like it was on fast forward, right? That you were doing all of this and, it totally immersed into it. And it feels like it really prepared you to be a startup founder. Now, just a quick rundown of this. You had internships and fellowships at Tesla, Ripcord, an engineering fellowship at Kleiner Perkins, programs with Contrary, Envision Accelerator, Corporate Startup Lab, Dorm Room Fund, all in there. You had product manager roles with Visa on cross-border real-time payments, deep learning and AI with Nvidia, and then the product manager role with Wind Ranger Labs, which is the product lab of BitDAO and Marana Ventures. A lot of that just kind of resonates with me. How did all of this prepare you to launch Quest Labs with your co-founder?
Great question. So as you can see, I am a very curious person, and I've delved into a lot of very different types of experiences, starting from working in fintech to working in deep learning in Nvidia to Web3. But there's an underlying theme across all of this, right? So if we dial up back even before this, how I grew up in my household back when I was growing up was my dad was an engineer, my mom was an architect. So there was always this overlap of technology and creativity, to the point where, my mom was an architect. So she'd be like, oh, should go study architecture. And my dad was like, what is architecture? Computer architecture is the same thing. And to anyone who knows computer science would know that computer architecture and real life architecture is very different. It's like two arguments going on. And back then I knew that I didn't have to pick or choose one or the other. I could do both. So when I went to university, I kind of picked computer science, but was doing design on the side and really focusing on technology from a perspective of what's going to move the next set of industries, or emerging technologies was my passion. So I dived into ML back when AI wasn't cool like it is now. I dived into cryptography and really mixing these different types of tech. A lot of people mentioned that you should focus, you should choose one path or the other. But that's kind of where the drift started to show when I had to take up a job or focus on a task. I felt like I was being boxed in and not being able to combine different technologies to build them, empower, and impact businesses and users. And that's when I realized being a founder, I get to build a world that I want to see, and at the same time help others make money. So that's what this whole thing came about. And I knew from a very early on back in undergrad that I wanted to be a founder. All of these experiences led me to building the company that I am today, because I got to spend time working as a researcher at Carnegie Mellon and Davis, studying recommender systems, which I mentioned I was obsessed with ML, specifically understanding how to help large organizations drive user experiences. So that was one part that led to the belief of Quest. And the second part was mainly I was working at Nvidia, working with terabytes of data for organizations such as Alibaba, Taobao, these large e-commerce giants, helping them deliver personalized experiences at scale. So again, it was ML, recommender systems. And then I realized with Web3 and all of the learnings that I did when I jumped into building full-time was I've spent quite a bit of time building all of this enterprise technology, helping other organizations unlock the power of data. But I tried to understand, why aren't more businesses taking part in the upside of this data? And how can we unlock a new economy almost? And all of these thoughts were crazy to people in Web 2 who constantly are, they have this habit of sticking to what works and selling to other businesses. But Web 3 really opens up a world of possibilities from a philosophical standpoint as to what the world can power through technology. And then I came across primitives in Web3, such as self-sovereign identity, verifiable credentials, and a lot of really cool projects in the space building this, who we decided to partner up with. And that's kind of how Quest came about. So today what we're building is this new almost data economy for new businesses to come in, take part in the upside of that. This is, again, very high level and philosophical, but that's how it led to this.
And how did you meet your co-founder, Shubham, to bring this all together?
So funny part was back in COVID, when everyone was building and exploring new things outside of their job, I was also doing so. I was working full-time at Nvidia, but I was always very intrigued about what it is like to be an actual founder building full-time. And Shubham as well was in a very similar position, but he was back then building and mining and doing stuff in crypto, which, again, I knew about, but I didn't know that there were actually people building in the space. Yeah. I was like, wait, you're actually building a dApp? Like, yeah. That's insane to me, because back then crypto, again, was very hush-hush and only a few people were in the space. And I was in a very B2B Web 2 world. And then when we started working together, it's like all of our philosophical beliefs aligned more than the tech part of it. And then we realized that what we're trying to unlock for the businesses and the creators that we're working with makes a lot of sense to do so using crypto rails. And the main reason I was like, okay, I'm going to work with you if you can build this. And that's how it started. He could build and I could, I guess, sell and make it happen from a perspective of what it takes for a business outside of the building part. So we just built and shipped a product in 2 months, which till today everyone was like, how did you do that?
Yeah.
It would take other companies $2 million and 18 months of runway to build this. So that shocked us. We were like, oh, we were super scrappy. And then we kept building and realizing we're creating value amongst each other, and that's how it came about. Yeah.
Okay, that's awesome. And it's amazing, like you were attracted to someone who could just build, right? In terms of, partnering and co-founding this business. You had this deep obsession with deep tech, with emerging tech, with, like you said, recommender systems, machine learning. Did you ever kind of view yourself as someone who could code and develop? Or, you kind of talk about yourself as a product engineer.
Yeah.
Right? Was there ever any pull into the development side yourself?
Yeah. So prior to when I partnered up with Shubham, my previous co-founder who I was working with, I was the builder.
Okay.
And that's when I realized that you should focus on your strengths. And I think number one, learning as a founder is, if you're forcing something to happen on a day-to-day basis, that's probably not your strength. And if it's not happening, you should definitely refocus and double down on what you're good at. So then very quickly we realized, my previous co-founder, that we both were good at one thing and there was no overlap of strengths. But definitely for the initial months of Quest, I was the front-end engineer, to the extent where I decided to never write React code again. It's both better for the company and my mental health.
Good.
But yeah, I have a computer science background, so I definitely code and go back to coding, but now realize that it's better for me to focus.
Is it liberating?
Very liberating.
I bet.
Like till today, I started off as a software engineer, and till today I do not, well, I appreciate, but I don't understand how you can focus on one line of code versus I feel like my brain thinks of theses and ideas, and when I'm writing one line of code, I'm like, I could be thinking of all these other things. And I just do not have the patience to sit and write lines of code. But again, coding is super impactful for businesses. So,
did you ever listen to music when you were coding?
I've tried everything.
Did you? Yeah,
Everything.
No, I hear that techno, electronic music is big because that just keeps your mind focused on a pattern of the doom.
I was obsessed with EDM.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I talked to one of our mentors about this a while back, Lambert Despo, and about this analogy between blockchain and electronic music. And I won't get into it, but it was deep, and that's why he's a mentor.
Explains why there's so much EDM at all the crypto after parties of conferences.
Totally, it's there. But listen, I want to dig into Quest, right? So tell me, what is Quest, and why is it something that the world needs right now?
Yeah. So what's happening in the world is you would see that, and this has been a constant problem, I think it's just increasing because of all the shifts in regulations and whatnot for businesses not being able to collect user data in scalable manners, mainly because Apple, Google, their regulations are not being able to use cookies anymore, and all of this new shifts that are happening. And why do businesses need to collect this data, right? It's the whole core of business data and B2B data is to understand users. And regardless of what happens in the world, Web3, AI, businesses still have a need to use user data to derive insights and then experiences. So Quest started with the belief that how can we power businesses and then platforms powering these businesses in order to leverage this data, but also power experiences. So first part of it was, again, leverage this user-owned user data, which is a very new primitive for organizations. And then the experience part of it is blockchain-powered experiences, which again, is a whole new value prop for platforms and for businesses. So that's what Quest is doing. We're building the infrastructure and tooling. More specifically, set of tooling includes SDKs, and the infrastructure is embeddable plugins, the no-code tooling around it. And what we see Quest becoming is almost like a host layer or a middleware for these other companies. So we don't want to be known to the users. We want to just be powering other businesses to implement these new engagement models.
Okay, I get it. Talk us through an example of how organizations are leveraging Quest at your MVP stage, right?
Yep. So a great example could be, let's take a media company who currently, a Web3 media company who has minted NFTs, who has a great community, who has a product. They also have a metaverse and a DAO, and they launched maybe a token or not. In this case, the organization we're working with has just NFTs launched, and they have users, right? But when we ask them a very simple question of how do you see yourself driving value to these users post this NFT launch or post your product or your merch, they don't have answers. There was silence in the room. The marketer mentioned a few things around ad campaigns, very Web2-centric engagement models, and mentioned they're doing some sort of leveraging analytics of Discord, which left us shocked and in disbelief simply because we asked them, have you tried to build a deeper incentive system powered by your user data? But they're like, what user data? So that was shocking to the point where I have built this for, again, like very large organizations who themselves find it very hard to leverage zero-party data. And then we realized that there's a huge gap, starting with Web3 native brands. But when we spoke with other brands, of course, it was a similar problem with different subset of data. And how they're using it at the MVP stage is, again, we mentioned we're more of a middleware. So they've embedded our software in their existing website and in their metaverse. So simply a UI pop-up enables the user to add this data, but we've gamified the experience, which is what is super powerful because that's where the engagement piece comes in. And gamification, again, isn't new or novel. It's very powerful, so we're leveraging it, but it gives the users an incentive to give this data, and we infuse it with third-party and first-party data to create these user profiles, which they can then use to make decisions. So the marketer at this organization, Web3 native organization, is now able to exactly on a daily basis go back to his CEO and be like, okay, so this is how our organization can grow, and this is how we can incentivize them without any net new budget or expend from their side. So they're able to make more on their dollar.
Awesome. And I know that there are some network effects as part of all this. Can you talk us through that?
Yep. So I think the core piece of it is how are you able to take one organization and the value we're creating with them and multiply it to the other organizations in that ecosystem. And again, the power of Web3 enables this because there's privacy-preserving ways to share data between brands, different games. And what happens is, again, this is private information that the user has given the ability to share, which creates this network effects of information, not just about the user, but about different brands, which can enable cross-game or cross-brand or cross-platform even information sharing and data sharing, which as a user is amazing because now if I go to one metaverse or one game and I go to a different one, I'm able to have a much more personalized experiences only because of this data sharing model between organizations. And again, there might be a lot of conversations around regulation, privacy, and whatnot. They're like, why would brands share their proprietary data? But the truth is, when you're seeing a more increase on your spend on your existing budget, which they're anyway spending on ads, brands are willing to comply to such models and share data, which can increase net value with different organizations in the ecosystem. And that's the network effects that we hope to unlock for not just these monopoly large brands, but new brands coming in.
Yeah. I saw something recently, and we've all heard all of the rhetoric around Sandbox and Decentraland and others and the number of users there. And the guy who wrote the metaverse and how it will change everything came back and responded to a tweet, referring to those numbers and saying, well, yeah, but what about Roblox? What about Fortnite? What about these quasi-metaverse zones that people actually go to and play games? And if you run through Sandbox and go and explore a bit, you'll see a few things. But the user experience in Roblox and Fortnite is far better, right? Because these are much, much bigger. And is there a play for Quest into these, people point to the Web3 connected metaverse zones such as Sandbox and Decentraland all the time. And there's, the footfall of users there is small, but the Web2 connected quasi-metaverse zones, these are huge user amounts in there. Is there a play into those types of ecosystems for Quest?
It's interesting. That's kind of where we see a lot of the value long term. There's these large players, but there's also SMB brands and a whole ecosystem and economy around these brands and metaverses. Like every game or every large brand will have their own metaverse. And like you're mentioning, these are not purely Web3. They want to be to some extent, but they're not. So I think with Quest, what's interesting is that we're going to be able to power these large brands, but also these smaller brands. And where we see this taking part is we can partner with, for example, Sandbox, but also enable that collection of data and the network that we gain from there for other economies or other brands to participate in. And I think what we noticed with the Web3 space is, like you mentioned, with metaverses, with games as well, a lot of really great Web3 games has very low usage because of, again, so network issues, gas costs, and whatnot. What would be super big unlock for the Web3 ecosystem would be able for us to able to serve as a gateway for a lot of these Web2 users from Sandbox and from brands to leeway into the Web3 ecosystem, only because, like you mentioned, if the experience, they wouldn't even know again, right? They would get stuck in the user experiences of not having a wallet, not having the know-how of what these Web3 platforms are. But really, like they say Web 2.5, but we like to, again, be like more of a ghost and not even say any web anything.
Yep.
Because, you know, again, in Web 2, no one's saying that, oh, we're built on MongoDB versus this other database platform, right? So let's just Quest serve as the rails to form the bridge between them.
Yeah, I think there's something there, right? And, you know, when you talk about Web3 gaming specifically, there are tons of great Web3 games out there, but people just don't know that they're there.
Exactly.
I saw someone propose this type of Netflix for Web3 games. But if you are capturing the user data as people go across different metaverse zones, different games, with understanding that this is just your beachhead segment, right? This is your go-to-market segment for Quest, that you can act as that gateway, right? You can act at, and that's where the network effect comes in.
Yep. And we're incentivizing these users in a very organic way because, again, it's personalized experiences with data that they're sharing and the data that they're anyways working to do on the platform. So all my assets, all my information from Sandbox is leveraged. And again, as an ecosystem, there's a growth overall. So no one's mad. No one's like, you're taking users away from me or anything. It's what was meant to happen in the internet from day one.
Exactly. I love that. And when you think about what the world might look like when Quest is an absolute necessity for online organizations, right? How will kind of some of these network effects that we're talking about, how will that deliver this future world, right? What is this going to look like? And you know, on the context of big vision, before you answer this question, I just want to share what your co-founder, Shubham, shared with me, that, Pete, what we want this to get to is where we know that you love marshmallows. And when you log in and you go to your favorite website or game, whether it's Web3, Web 2.5, Web 2, whatever web, that you see marshmallows coming towards you. And I'm like, I love that. Well, my kids would love that because my kids love marshmallows.
Yeah,
right?
Same.
So, you know, I get that, and I see the kind of this true personalization of your internet experience, right? And brands being able to benefit from that, but also do it in such a way that is interconnecting users and interconnecting experiences and meaningful experiences, so that people are like, yeah, I actually want my data to be shared, right? And where you get to that sovereign relationship of being able to say, yeah, we're for the last 25 years of Web 2, we haven't had that control. Yep. And now we can have that control. What does this world look like for you when Quest is an absolute necessity?
Exactly how you mentioned it. I had a conversation a few years ago with the director of marketing at a very large company. I won't name names, but I mentioned, like, I go to your website, you're like one of the top brands in the world, and why am I not able to find what I'm looking for? And then in the internet at large, you know, if I'm looking for green khaki pants or something, I have to go to these 5 different websites, and the internet, it's like a very basic problem, right? And that's this obsession with us for me and Shubham started a long time ago when, you know, him working at Amazon and LinkedIn, and then me solving this for large e-commerce giants. And then we realized no matter what these monopoly companies do, they're never going to care about the larger internet in general. That's kind of where the big Web3 play is. And our vision is exactly as you mentioned. And if I go from one game to another and one platform to another, all the work that I'm doing should carry over. And for brands, it's a direct channel of communication. Now they don't have to go through some of these large giants, such as Google, Facebook, in order to acquire users. They're able to directly communicate with them. For us, the power is in powering the platforms that are powering the brand. So, for example, we work with creator platforms and they're working with creators. So we're able to power this from a more infrastructural standpoint and make it easy, so then they don't have to question of why should I implement this technology. We've made it so simple for them too. So yeah, if any of you guys listening, if tomorrow, you know, you go to a store such as Starbucks and you go to another store such as Chipotle, you will be rewarded in this world instead of just, you know, being like, okay, I eat all this food. What's the point? There's no reward for me.
Yeah, no, it interconnection, we need that. And there's so many points in time where I've just, you know, I'm messing around with a new app on my phone and I'm like, I just wish these two would talk to each other. and that it should all fall back on me, because in the real world it does, and we just need the virtual world to catch up, which is...
I heard something recently where it was like the next generation of sustainable consumer businesses will be built around passion. And what that really means is, again, in Web3, this is a familiar term, but converting users into owners, and how can we not monetize off of them, but build, co-create with them, and like you're mentioning, communicate between different organizations to help with the co-creation. Again, for a lot of people, it might sound very utopian, and maybe in one world this will happen. But I think the works have started. We've already seen the adoption curve with a lot of large companies, so it's here.
Yeah, I'm going to quote him. I'm going to do this. The future is already here. It's just not that evenly distributed. And that is William Gibson, who wrote Neuromancer. One of my favorite ones. Listen, but that sums it up.
Yep.
Listen, one of the things I love about your website, Deb, is that your new one doesn't mention the words blockchain, crypto, NFT, and only has a subtle reference to tokens overall. The term Web3 is only really visible at the very bottom when you scroll all the way down. Was this intentional? Right? Did you mean for this to happen? And how would you like to see that reflected in the industry?
Yep, I think it's already started reflecting in the industry, where everyone is not obsessed with. People are becoming less obsessed with, what chain are you on, and are you Web 3 or Web 2.5, and all these don't matter. I think I go back to the simple saying of like, how many times in a Web 2 company do they say that, I'm using Snowflake or MongoDB? Like even as an investor, as a founder, as a customer, I don't care where you store your data, as long as it's safe. And we know it's safe because, of course, it's blockchain powered. There's trust involved, and I think our new website is a testament to the fact that we want to be a Ghost middle layer. We want to be powering the next platforms to move on to Web3 rails, leverage the blockchain, but in a way that's scalable, sustainable, but really just focus on the value unlocked with Quest, which is user-owned experiences, which is scalable, personalized user experiences. So that's exactly what we've portrayed on the website.
Gotcha. And one of the things I'm feeling is that this is such a competitive space, and that technology is moving so fast, or the development of tech is moving so fast. Those who are coding are developing it so fast, and we're now going to have, we now have an added competitive angle as well with generative code, right? And I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole because I don't know that space. So I'll park that for a second. But because it is so competitive right now, how are you going to build the moat of defensibility around Quest?
Yeah, we've thought about this quite a bit because we started out our journeys building in Web 2. And then back then, I truly asked Web 2 founders, how are you going to be defensible? And I think one of the reasons why we found Web 3 so attractive was because of the inherent network effects of a lot of the infrastructure that we're building. And the space is moving fast, but I think deep insight and moving fast is what is key to a founder's growth. For us, we've spent quite a bit of time building, and think now we come to realize gaining market share is even in Web3 is a function of moving fast. But what is interesting about our solution is that the network effects is built into the system. So every time we integrate with a customer base, which is other platforms and other businesses, we have tapped into their network, which then goes into forming what we call these user-owned graphs, which start to power and the economy that we hope to create in the future, and the data sharing and whatnot. So winning in this space, or us winning as a business, or any business winning in this category, would be a function of being able to partner, tap into the network effects of the graph, and then what we unlock will be what will help us win. So I think that's the defensibility that we have, and we've really thought this through while building it, because I think a lot of businesses start out with, okay, we'll be a tool and whatnot, and in this world, that can be built really quickly.
Yeah, I hear you. And what I'm sensing as well is that you mentioned a key word there is partner, right? Is that you need to have a certain ability with human interaction in order to partner. Yeah. Do you think all these experiences have provided a good base for you for that, to be able to build these relationships?
I think as a space, we've all evolved. There was definitely times back, even 1 year ago, when a lot of us were speaking a lot of Web3 jargon and realizing that as a space, we'll just be able to build value for each other and sell to each other. But as we evolve, I already see that everyone has dialed down on the technical Web3 jargon, is able to communicate to people outside of the space in a way where they're willing to adopt, experiment, and leverage these technologies to grow. And as long as we can say we're providing value to the extent that they're spending less, if we can say that the ad dollars that you spend on Google, we can make more money on that ad spend, then businesses are really willing to adopt. And I think we've learned that the language goes back to the business language and showing the ROI in a business versus focusing on the tech part of it. So I think we've come, as a company ourselves, we've come to that, and we're excited to that's why dial this up, go beyond just selling to Web3 to power retail, to power e-commerce, and double down on integrations with those sectors.
Oh, absolutely. And we talk about this so much within Techstars with a cohort, and just in passing with people who come through and that they visited this week, is that if you want to grow Web3, you need to sell to Web2. Yeah. And if you want to sell to Web2, you're going to find Web2 investors that are also interested in what you're doing. Because if you can convert and speak that language back to Web2 from a customer standpoint, you should be able to speak that language from an investor standpoint. And you have a much greater segment of investors 100%. To choose from when you're building your cap table and picking those investors that you want to partner with for the long term, right? 100%. Which is the context and the mindset of all this. Cool. Listen, all of this, you mentioned the word learning. I like this concept of earned secrets. And I ask this of a lot of people, in that it's something that through your life experience that you've developed something that you know that either others don't know or they believe to be false and you believe it to be true. What is Deb's earned secret?
Yeah. Funny thing, I'll be honest, I did ask GPT
the
answer to this question because I was so curious, because this specific question, something that AI cannot answer. It's very personal, right? But what it mentioned was something that really is powerful, and it kind of goes along with what I've learned in my life very accurately. It mentioned that I don't have any decision-making capabilities. I am just a product of instructions and programs, and I do what I've been told. And one thing that's interesting about my experience is I've lived in multiple countries. I speak multiple languages. Even Techstars is a global program, which I really appreciate. One thing I've learned is my earned secret is really if you silo yourself in one country, in one space, in one economy, or one type of friend group or whatnot, you limit yourself to perspective, which is super important as a founder, as an entrepreneur. And my earned secret has been to really not be the programmed human being who goes through life with a set of instructions, which is, okay, I have a job, I get married, that's it. A lot of my culture in Asia has also been, that's it, you have this path to life. And my struggle has always been with my parents is how do I combat that? And no, I don't want to follow this path. I want to carve my own path. And my learnings come from, at every point, question yourself and take the path less chosen. So that's the kind of earned secret, and I've kind of followed that throughout my life till now.
That's great. That's great. It's the only way you're going to get the new experiences.
Yeah, and GPT knows. Somehow they still know the answer to this question.
I had GPT write a story for me. Back in college, I did a Greek mythology elective course just because I love Greek mythology.
Oh, right? Wow, yeah.
And it was very simple. It was a very easy course. And we had to write an analogy of a childhood experience compared to a Greek myth.
Oh, wow.
And draw out the similarities. Yeah. So I chose a story of Sisyphus, who would push the boulder up the hill. Yeah. He was in Hades, and his life sentence was keep pushing the boulder up the hill, and when you get to the top of the hill, the boulder's going to just fall back down. And you got to go back to the bottom of the hill and start all over. So I drew the analogy to me going sledding as a kid, and where I would walk up the hill carrying my sled, and I get to the top of the hill, and I'd slip and fall into the sled, and then slide all the way back down. And I asked ChatGPT to write the story, and I said, can you please write a story about a kid named Pete Townsend who grew up down the street from what was called Cathedral Hill, and he'd go sledding, and compared to the story of Sisyphus. And it wrote that exact story for me.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, all right, this is going to move so fast.
Yeah, exactly.
But the humanity of it, you asked GPT about this, and they couldn't give you a good answer.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. It's it gave me an answer, but it made me realize it's relatable. And it is so, yeah. So even a computer program of being programmed is what, I mean, I drew the analogy to that of a normal human going through life. Yeah. They're just programmed. They can't think. And that's why a lot of could be great entrepreneurs don't end up being, because kind of they're just sucked into, I work at a big tech company. I'll just keep doing that because I'm getting money or something along those lines. Yeah.
sometimes when you ask questions, the most helpful answer you can get is, I don't have an answer for you.
Yeah.
Right?
Learned that the hard way.
Exactly. We've gone deep into your head, Deb, here in this chat. What is one thing that people wouldn't expect to know about you at all?
Yeah, it's one thing that surprises people is, like I mentioned, one of those things. I've gone through life and had multiple experiences where you would think that I'd follow a certain path. Like, I was working as a PM at Nvidia, and the next expected step would be to continue work in AI or get an MBA. But I think what people miss out is I have almost a polar personality where I'm interested in very opposite things, where I might be a very studious person, but I equally love music festivals, or I'm super passionate about AI, but also super deep into crypto. And no one can understand why, but I think one of the things unexpected is I could be talking to you about, again, specific topic deep, but you'd be shocked to know that I'm interested in the polar opposite of that. So
okay, like what's your favorite music festival?
Well, EDM festivals, Coachella.
Okay, Coachella.
Coachella, EDC. But I could also be super into classical music, and you'd be like, wait, that doesn't make any sense.
No. I get it. It's the rhythm of the music, or there's something about music and where you end up with very eclectic taste. Like I was mad into jazz in college for a couple of years because I went and saw one gig, Joshua something or another. I forget his second name, but it'll come back to me. And it just stuck. And I listened to his stuff. And then I went out and I bought some vinyl of John Coltrane. And my wife just got me a new turntable for my 50th birthday. Oh. And now I can listen to the John Coltrane records again.
Yeah,
so we're in a good place. Yeah. But no, there's something about the music. There's this word syncopation in jazz, but I'm a hell of a lot more into like early 90s hip hop than I am jazz anyway. So different story.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's something that I need to tap into more.
Absolutely. What's the best way for people to get in touch with you, Deb?
I mean, we live in a Web3 world where Twitter is the main, what people use, Twitter and Telegram. You can find me at xdebstep on both of those places, or email works as well.
Perfect. All right. Well, Deb, listen, this was such an enjoyable chat. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Pete.
That does it for this week, folks. Thanks to Deb for opening up her mind to help us figure out why she does what she does. And you can learn more about Deb and Quest Labs in the show notes on our website, moneyneversleeps.ie. If you like what you heard, please leave us a rating and or review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, as it helps others to find the show. Thanks to Conan Brophy from Create Sound for mixing and editing this episode. Conan is an excellent media man to get in touch with when you're thinking about launching your own podcast. Also, thanks to Salim Chowdhury from Techstars here in London for giving me a lend of all of his podcast equipment and setting it up for me so professionally. Thank you, Salim. You are truly a great person. As for me, I'm an early stage startup investor focused on where fintech meets crypto and crypto meets Web3, and I lead the Techstars Web3 Accelerator. There are plenty of links in the show notes on moneyneversleeps.ie and how to get in touch, so don't hesitate to reach out. Finally, until next time, thanks for listening. See ya.
Money never sleeps, pal.